last summer, but when I read the 30th Psalm again and preparing for today, I realized that I had kind of just glossed over this particular verse, the one that messed me up, our memory verse for this month. Verse 2, where David says, I cried to you for help, and you healed me. That messed me up because it said that David asked for help, and he got healing. You'll get that later. It said to me that God might not give you what you ask for, but God will give you what you need every time. Now, a lot of y'all don't really think that's what that verse said, but walk with me for a minute. Because reading this verse messed me up so much that I had to go and look at the Greek and the Hebrew to make sure it wasn't supposed to say, Lord, I cried to you for help and you helped me. But this word in the Greek that means to heal isn't found any place else in the Bible. This is the only occurrence. The Hebrew word would be Rapha, right, to heal. You know, Jehovah Rapha, God who heals. Even if you don't know in the Hebrew, somebody's mama or grandmama or big mama has surely given testimony to the God who is a doctor in the sick room, God the healer. Oh Lord, my God, I cried to you for help, and you have healed me. The Message version of that verse says, God, my God, I yelled for help, and you put me together. Now, some of the stuff you might read in the commentaries about this psalm will lead you to believe that David was asking for help because he was injured. The heading in my New Revised Standard Version says, Thanksgiving for recovery from grave illness. But show me where that's at in the scripture. David didn't say, oh Lord, I fell and broke my leg and I cried to you for help and you healed me. Or I cried to you for healing and you healed me. I mean, the God that I serve can heal your injuries and illnesses, but my God is so much more than a doctor in the sick room. The God we serve is also known to be a lawyer in the courtroom, a heart fixer and a mind regulator, as the old folks used to say, a way maker when there is no way, a friend when you're friendless, a mother to the motherless, and a father to the fatherless. Jehovah Rapha can heal your broken bones and your broken spirit. You know how the 2020 theme for Imani is nurturing healthy minds, bodies, and souls, right? Well, our Lord is the physician of the mind, of the body, and of the soul. And so when David says that God healed him, sure, he could have been talking about being healed from some physical affliction. Maybe he was injured or sick and God healed him. Or maybe David, the poet, the songwriter, the artist, was using the word for healed metaphorically and not literally. You know, it can happen. Maybe David cried to God for help because he was mentally drained. Maybe David was depressed. Maybe David had backslidden in some particular sin from his past. Maybe David had just had enough. Maybe David was contemplating suicide. Maybe David was at the end of his rope. Oh Lord, my God, I cried to you for help and you have healed me. Sometimes you don't even know what kind of help you need. Just holler, Jesus, help me, Lord. And trust that whatever God does will be right. Because God might not give you what you ask for, but God will give you what you need every time. I cried to you for help, and you healed me. I cried, you healed. You cried, God heals.
Amen.
David says in the 34th Psalm that the righteous cry out and the Lord hears them. God delivers them from all their troubles. You cry out, God delivers. I cried to you for help, and you healed me. Have you ever cried out to God for help with an issue or a situation and gotten healing in response? I cried to God for help once. I've cried to God for help way more than once. I cried to God for help daily, sometimes multiple times a day. I cried to God for help when I tested positive for HIV 15 years ago. That initial diagnosis will have you packing your whole life away because it seems like it's just over. Never gonna date again, never gonna get married or have kids, probably gonna lose some friends. might have limited job opportunities. The devil in that diagnosis will have you thinking that your life is over. I cried to God for help. I fought with my HIV, but the healing I experienced was a healing of my mind.
Amen.
Because I still live with HIV, but I have been healed. God may not give you what you ask for, but God will give you what you need every time. Oh Lord, my God, I cry to you for help, and you have healed me. I wonder if it works the same for communities and nations as it does for individuals. I mean, I wonder if we cried out together as a people, what would happen? If all of Oakland let out a collective cry to God for help, what might that healing look like in our communities?
Well,
If all of Black America cried to God for help in this strange land we're living in, what kind of healing might we experience as a people? There's a part of Exodus in the Hebrew Bible that talks about social and religious laws. You know, after God gives Moses the 10 Commandments to give to the people, all this other law comes forth, right? The law concerning the altar, the law concerning the slaves, the law concerning violence, laws concerning property, laws of restitution. And in chapter 22 of Exodus, we get to social and religious laws. And the law clearly states, you shall not wrong or oppress a resident alien, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. You shall not abuse any widow or orphan. If you do abuse them, when they cry out to me, I will surely heed their cry. They cry out, God heeds their cry. Now, that scripture goes on to say that my wrath will burn and I will kill you with the sword, and your wives shall become widows and your children orphans. But don't tell Trump's evangelical supporters that part. It might mess with their racist immigration policy goals. When they cry out to me, I surely heed their cry. Oh Lord, my God, I cry to you for help, and you have healed me. Now, I want to take a few minutes to talk about how God heals, because just like God may not give you what you ask for, but God will give you what you need every time. God, being the omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent God that God is, may not come when you call, but God is always on time. And I'm glad that we serve it on time, God. Sometimes we cry to God for help, and when God doesn't answer by the time we say amen, we think that maybe God didn't hear us. Or maybe God's not going to answer that particular prayer. The truth of the matter is that our time is not God's time. In Isaiah 55, God says through the prophet, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. So when you cry to God for help, I need you to understand that God hears, God heeds, God heals in God's time. Sometimes God heals immediately. You remember in Matthew 12 when Jesus went to the synagogue on the Sabbath and there was a man there who had a shriveled hand? All eyes were on Jesus. Would he heal this man? I mean, it was the Sabbath, and you can't be doing work on the Sabbath, and performing a miracle is a form of work. And work on the Sabbath was like, nah. And the Pharisees had already tried it because the disciples had picked some heads of grain to eat as they were passing through the grain fields on their way to the synagogue, and that was work. So the Pharisees were ready to let Jesus have it if he even thought about healing this man with a shriveled hand on the Sabbath. But Jesus always elevated people over process.
all right.
So he said to the man, stretch out your hand. So he stretched it out, and it was completely restored, just as sound as the other. It was an immediate miracle, an instant healing. The man stretched his hand toward Jesus, and it was completely restored. He stretched, and Jesus restored. Some healings are like that, instant, unexplainable, when you least expect it. But when God chooses to heal immediately, it is ultimately to glorify God, so that we recognize that God is so much bigger than our expectations. But God is the one who chooses the time and the place and the way that healing occurs. So if you cry to God for help and God doesn't heal you immediately, remember that sometimes God heals gradually. Like the story from Mark 8 where Jesus and his disciples were going through Bethsaida, and folks brought this blind man to him begging for help. Jesus took the blind man by the hand, led him outside the village, spit on the man's eyes, and laid hands on him. Then Jesus asked the man, do you see anything? Blind man looked up, squinted through a foggy haze and said, I see people, they look like trees walking about. Things were still a little blurry. It was better than before, but his sight wasn't totally restored. Jesus didn't heal him immediately. He could have, but he didn't. Instead, he performed a gradual miracle. Once more, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened, his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. The end result was healing. The process was different because it was gradual, but the end result was healing. Now, does that mean that gradual healing instead of immediate healing is like getting shortchanged? Is one less of a miracle than the other? I would say not so. Gradual healing is still healing, and we don't always understand why Jesus chooses to heal in one way or another. But in this case, a gradual healing might have been even more special than an immediate healing, because that blind man got to feel the touch of Jesus twice. The real blessing of healing isn't the result, it's the process. It's in the blessing that comes from spending a little quality time with Jesus. Feeling Jesus' touch, feeling the comfort of the Lord, his presence. So if people look like trees, if you've cried to God and haven't received all the help that you thought you wanted, keep trusting that God still has time to give you the healing that you need.
All right.
And if you've been trusting God for what seems like a long time and you still haven't recognized God's healing hand in your situation, I want you to consider that sometimes God takes God's own sweet time. Your healing will come eventually. Think about the Apostle Paul. Paul had some issues. He called it a thorn in his flesh, a messenger of Satan. And he asked God, pleaded with God over and over again to take it away. But God didn't take away Paul's thorn from as far as I can tell. Paul cried to God for help with this thorn at least 3 times. And God told Paul, my grace is sufficient for you. So if you've been crying out to God for help and God hasn't healed you yet, not an immediate healing and not a gradual healing, don't assume that your healing is never coming. When God doesn't grant immediate or gradual thorn removal, God gives something far better. God gives grace so that like Paul, we can live with our thorns and walk by faith through every question and every unmet longing. Sometimes we cry for help, and the healing is in our ability to go on with our thorns. Sometimes you need that thorn in your side in order to do the work that God has set out for you to do.
All right.
God may not give you what you want, but God will give you what you need every time. And whether the healing is immediate or the healing is gradual, or even when the healing is something that doesn't even seem like a direct response to our cries for help. Oh Lord, my God, I cry to you for help, and you have healed me. Many of us have ancestors who cried to God for help during the Middle Passage, and who cried to God for help throughout chattel slavery, and who cried to God for help through Jim Crow, and who cried to God for help during the Civil Rights Movement, and who cried to God for help even at this time when we still have to declare that Black Lives Matter. Those ancestors didn't know that their healing would come through their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. God may not give you what you want, but God will give you what you need every time in God's time. Now, if immediately and gradually have just passed you by and you can't figure out God's response to your cries for help, then maybe it's possible that there's some more work for you to do before God does what God is going to do. If we fast forward like 1,000 years after David penned this song, we can meet Paul in Corinth as he was dictating his letter to the Romans. And Paul says to the Romans in the 9th verse of the 10th chapter, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. So you have to, as the choir says, open your mouth and say something. Confess with your mouth that this man named Jesus, born of a virgin, who was with God in the beginning, who walked this earth as a fully human man and did not sin, this man who was a champion of the poor and the immigrant and the widow and the orphan, this man who was lynched by a corrupt government who knew the truth, a government who didn't want to hear the evidence that Jesus is Lord. So they shut down debate and tried to bury the truth with the body. If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, and if you believe in your heart that on the third day that borrowed tomb was empty because God raised him from the dead, if you confess with your mouth and you believe in your heart, you will be saved. That is God's promise. You will get the healing that you need in every situation. God may not give you what you want, but God will give you what you need every time. And it may not come when you want it, but your healing will come on time, every time. Oh Lord, my God, I cried to you for help, and you have healed me. You have got to cry out to God for help. Lift up your eyes to the hills and know that your help, your healing comes from the Lord. Oh Lord, my God, I cry to you for help, and you have healed me. Somebody's going to recite that memory verse next Sunday. Grandma said a closed mouth don't get fed. So God, hear me now. Your children need help. We need your help, Lord. Right here at 3300 MacArthur Boulevard, Oakland, California, 94602. It is yet to be the United States of America. Help us, Lord. Heal us, Lord. We confess that Jesus is Lord. We believe that you raised him from the grave. We are crying to you for help, God. Please heal us individually and collectively. We need your healing, mind, body, and soul. And God, forgive us if we're not asking for the right stuff. You know exactly what it is that we need. So we cry out to you for help, God. And we have faith that healing is yet on the way. Even now, hear our cries, Lord. Heed our cries, Lord, and heal us, mind, body, and soul, as only you are able, in your way and in your time. Let the people of God say,